The soul, the body, and the spirit. Where does one end and the other begin? What are their differences? What even are they? First thing needed to explain is that there is a difference between the physical body and the metaphysical thing, which I've chosen to call by the same name because of the long history of them being seen as being correlated or the same thing, even though I do not personally believe that these two things have an inherent correlation. It is just for the lack of a better one word term. The spirit or the personhood is what makes up the psyche of a person, and within it there is two different essences or two wills, the soul and the body. These two elements fight against one another. They are direct opposites battling for influence over the spirit to make it one and the same with itself, one being for the better, the other for the worse, because one is the will of good and the other is the will of bad. The will of good is the soul or the true will, and the metaphysical body is the will of bad and evil or the false will. The soul is the original of the two, being conceived at the same time as the spirit, being the will part of it. But later in development, the body forcefully manifests itself inside the spirit, tearing the spirit and soul's unity apart, and then tries to usurp the soul's role as commander of the spirit, unsuccessfully, only managing to insert itself as co-head. This process creates immense confusion for the spirit, now having two wills making it not know which to listen to. It's immense confusion stemming from not knowing how to distinguish the two from each other. Now having forgotten its true self, the soul and the body fight over dominance, trying to establish their will as the leading one. The soul, being the true will, tries to restore itself to return the spirit to its perfected and complete true self, being moral, good, and virtuous, having deeper meaning to existence, whereas the body, being the false will, tries to invent a false self for the spirit, being imperfect, fluctuating, immoral, evil, and self centered, having only shallow hedonist desire as a reason to exist. The metaphysical body desires to corrupt, deceive, and drag down the spirit, and thus it wants to destroy the soul. And the soul desires to clean, enlighten, and raise up the spirit, and thus it wants to destroy the body. But the unlearned spirit, not knowing from which any given desire comes from, then uses a cursed concoction of the two. But the spirit can still distinguish them from each other in many places. Hence why most people aren't terrible, violent, and evil people. But it can also learn to be able to better distinguish its true will's desire from the false will's desire. It is more easy for some to do or learn to do than others, but it is still impossible to 100% distinguish what is from the evil will and what is from the good will. The false will's desires are most commonly something that brings pleasure to the physical body. That's why the other name is like it is. And what makes it appealing to the spirits of most? It wants the spirit to engage in shallow, carnal delight. It wants it to engage in shallow, lower acts, to drag it down and away from the soul's true completion. It wants to corrupt it and hurt it. It wants it to turn it into something completely different than what it truly is. It wants it to turn into an evil being. The true will's desires are mostly things that pertain to spiritual health and completion. It wants to make the spirit return to the perfectly whole state they were in before the body's infection. But it is not an absolute rule that in all cases the soul wants something metaphysical and the body something physical. It just appears to be this way because the metaphysical world is larger, more important, and less corrupted by evil than the physical. And thus, when each tries to align themselves with their own moral element, they happen to mostly reach for different worlds. Even if the spirit knows something is a desire from the false will, it doesn't necessarily mean it will always disregard it and not indulge in it, because the body still misleads the spirit with lies of how sweet it'll be to engage with. Even though it knows it's only shallow pleasure, it still falls for it because of its own imperfection and its own susceptibility to be manipulated by emotion. The spirit serves as a motor, while the soul is supposed to be the control panel, controlling will and emotion. But of course, the infection of the cancerous metaphysical body also took some control over emotions, introducing negative ones and using them to pain the spirit. Made easier when its outside allies makes it able to overpower the soul's control, to inflict misery on the confused spirit who doesn't know where those emotions come from, or to use them to manipulate the spirit into following its ill will. The physical body isn't inherently sinful. As I stated earlier, the metaphysical body and physical body are not inherently linked. Instead, the physical body is like the vehicle's outside, or whatever it's called. I'm not a car guy, but the physical body serves as the wheels, the spirit as the motor, and the soul as the driver, together creating a complete, perfect, full person. However, the world has been corrupted, and the body turned to another victim of it, especially by the corruption going by the same name as it. The spirit has been infected with a false will that has overcome it with confusion, not knowing what its true self is anymore, that has made it start acting out false, evil desires that only drag it down and cause it harm. But the soul is still something every single one of us has in us, and if we try, we can stop listening to and acting out these false, negative, hollow desires and find our way back to the voice of the soul and find our true selves, and we can work our way towards true completion. We are the spirit. We only harm ourselves by living according to the voice of the false will, but we can put our full strength into learning how to tell it apart from the true will, and try our best to live by it, even though it's impossible for us to do so 100%. Yet, we must try to, for our own and for everyone's fulfillment and well being.